Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. Let's resume with today's activities on the Animation Day organized by the region of Madrid. I'd like to welcome Mariana, who's going to be talking to us about a very special project. And not only the project is wonderful, but also the whole process that the project has gone through was actually something that we need to highlight. It's a project that we discovered thanks to Cartoon Springboard that will take place on the 24th till 26th October this month. And after going through Cartoon Springboard and being discovered by producers, and then it was presented during the Cartoon Forum with very well established partners. And this is the co-production forum for animation in Europe. So we have asked her to tell us about this journey and this project. So thank you very much, Mariana. Hello. Thank you for being here. My name is Mariana Cadenas Sangronis, and as Manuel said, I have just presented this project 3 weeks ago at Cartoon Forum. So I usually talk to smaller audiences. So I hope that this is interesting for you all. I have prepared this presentation so that I could repeat what I did at Cartoon Forum. I understand that some of you are interested in doing a similar presentation, so I hope it is helpful as a reference. And then a second part of my presentation will dig deeper into what is not being said at Cartoon Springboard and Cartoon Forum, so that you also have that vision, that idea. So as I said, my name is Mariana. I am a journalist from Venezuela. I live in Brussels. I have spent 7 years in Brussels, where I studied cinema, and I became a refugee. This topic in Spain is well known. I don't need to tell you more about the situation in my country. And well, I came to talk to you all about a story called Exit Tales, which is called Cuentos de Salida in Spanish. It's an animated series for the whole family that started with this beautiful drawing. It's a story which is very much linked to my personal story. It is the story of Daniel, an 8-year-old boy who had to live his life in Caracas, which is also my hometown, to move to Lima in Peru. This is Dino, his best friend, Daniel's best friend, his travel companion, and his toy, the toy he's had all of his childhood. When I met him, Daniel told me that a year prior to that, his dad had left for Lima, and since the situation in Venezuela was complicated and they couldn't buy food, they decided to migrate together with his sister and his mom. And his mom said, "Don't worry about your clothes. Here you have a backpack, and you have to choose the toys that you want to take with you." And it took him weeks to decide which toys he was going to take. He took, in the end, a Captain America, some small toys, and Dino, his toy, the toy that he had had all his life. During this 14-day journey from Caracas to Lima, which is the same distance that you would find from Brussels to Istanbul, he walked, and he had to take buses, and he walked, and he doesn't know how he got to Lima. But at the end of my presentation, he said that he lost Dino, and he thought that Dino had gone back to his home and was waiting for him to go back home. So this is the inspiration of this project of children who have migrated and how they use their imagination to understand their new.
En mi maleta nada más metí mi ropa, en un bolsito mis muñecos grandes nada más, uno de Capitán América, un dinosaurio pero se me perdió en el viaje. Nada más recuerdo Ecuador, Bolivia, Cúcuta. Era muy fuerte el viaje. A veces en la noche cuando me acuesto a dormir me duele mucho el corazón porque mi abuelita la extraño demasiado. Era mi abuelita preferida y yo la quería mucho, 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 mucho.
Gracias.
Thank you. So, what is Exit Tales? Well, Exit Tales is a special series with 6 episodes, 12 minutes each, that shows the story of 6 boys and girls coming from 6 different countries who had to leave due to 6 different reasons. These are real stories, sometimes hard stories, but above all, they're inspiring stories filled with resilience and magic. I'll go back. No, fourth. Okay, so the first episode is Daniel, the boy you just met from Venezuela. He left with his mom and sister. He came from a country with an economic and political crisis. Episode 2, I'm sorry, no, 2, 3, 4, and 5 and 6 are currently being developed, but these are archetypes. They're archetypes of characters that we're looking for based on data, and we have already done a preliminary work in the previous years. So we have Ana, who is a pre-teenager from Guatemala. Her parents have decided to send her on her own with neighbors from her neighborhood because she was suffering due to gang violence. Then we have Akol, a boy from South Sudan who came from a refugee camp, and he's being re replaced somewhere else thanks to the UN. Then we have Waled from Afghanistan, 11 years old, who was born in a country where there were no Talibans, and now he has just fled once again together with his uncle from Kabul airport. Then we have Fatima, who's 8 years old. I'm sorry, I'm going to get all the way here. She's from Syria. She's a girl who was born in a country at war, and she doesn't really remember Syria because most of her life she's lived in Turkey. Right now, she's going to go meet her older brother who fled when the war started. A brother she does not know, hasn't met. And then we have Ivan, a boy, a 9-year-old boy from the Ukraine who is fleeing from war. His father has had to stay in his country to fight, and he is with his mom in Europe. So all of these stories are different stories, but what unites them are 3 elements. First, these are real witness testimonies where the real voices of these kids, they tell the story of their trip that goes from point A to point B, and they use magic and imagination as the most important narrative point. If we take episode 1, we listen to Daniel's voice. He goes from Caracas to Lima, and the magic point is the dinosaur, an element that is lost, as the many things that he has lost, his friends, his school, his grandmother. But there's also a transformation point because during the story, the dinosaur becomes a big dinosaur that moves around and that is very comical and that represents many things that he cannot express. This idea of becoming something bigger than you would ever know, of growing very rough skin and understanding the idea that you will always have to do something different. I'm sorry about that. I went a bit far because why did we decide to create a series such as this one? Well, currently there are 43.3 million children who are displaced the world over. This is the highest figure in our history, and unfortunately, this figure is previous to the Gaza Strip situation. So migration is a crisis that is going to keep on happening. And the question as a filmmaker is what Ina said this morning. What sort of conversations do we want to have around migration? What is our responsibility that around this topic that can be very politicized? So this is why this series have been created specifically for the families and children who are 9 to 12 years old. And we think that if we uh, keep their world alive with their words, with their testimonies, we will be able to reach out to this audience. How do we do it? Well, we do it with a co-creation approach. This is something that happens quite a lot in creation, especially when we talk about trauma, especially with children. And we generate a special device so that we can not just register their voices, but also to get their stories and get inspiration for a real world. So, with regards to the first episode that was produced during COVID, I had some drawing workshops, online workshops with kids who were around Daniel's age, who had a migration background that were linked to Venezuela. Their parents were from Venezuela. They had migrated from Venezuela. And during these sessions, they shared their story. I shared mine. I would draw something for them, and they drew something for me when I told them about the story of Daniel. And this resulted in a collection of amazing dinosaurs that I have in my room. But we also got our graphic world thanks to Catarina Sobral's work. She is the art director for this project. She's a great artist and a friend from Portugal who comes from the world of publishing houses with all sorts of children works. And so, what was our world like? Our world is um, a childish world where forms and shapes are not correct. They come from a child's world, and the characters move in a simple way. And I say simple way because it seems simple, but it's not that simple. So it's simple, kind of. So it's in 2D, hybrid 2D. I was going to say that we use Cartoon Springboard, but that's not it. It's Toon Boom, Harmony, and Shotgrid to work with different artists. And the result we obtained was that of the trailer that we just watched, the 45-second trailer that we presented during Cartoon Forum. But I want to show to you another trailer that doesn't have any animation so that you can listen to the spirit of Daniel's voice and his story.
En mi maleta nada más metí mi ropa. En un bolsito mis muñecos grandes nada más y unos que otros chiquitos. Uno de Capitán América, un dinosaurio pero se me perdió en el viaje, en un carro porque no lo llegué a ver al siguiente carro, al siguiente viaje. Lo estaba buscando y no lo vi. Imagina que iba a ser una casa grande, una televisión, una computadora. Bueno, el llegar no fue así, nos mudamos para otro cuartico y ahorita estamos en un cuartito, ahorita sí estoy en una vida tranquila. Pero a veces en la noche cuando me acuesto a dormir me duele mucho el corazón porque mi abuelita la extraño demasiado. Yo la quería demasiado, era mi abuelita preferida. Tengo otra abuelita, pero ella era mi abuelita preferida. Yo la quería mucho, 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 mucho.
Esta es la parte.
So this is the part that my producer would be doing. My producer is called, what's the name of my producer? Martin Schmidt. He's going to kill me. So he comes from Storyhouse Film, a 10-year-old producing company. He does not come from the animation world. It's his first animation project. But we met when we both read this sentence: empower and inspire future generations through stories with purpose. And this series wants to generate a debate, a discussion at another level on immigration, and it is the sort of movies and the sort of projects that Martin usually does through documentary and fiction. The team is made up of Martin, I am the director, Caterina Sobral is the art director, and Marco Levantacci is the production chief, and he's the only person in the team that has actually worked in an animation studio before. And I wanted to highlight that because it's a bit what Ina said at the beginning. It's different to Diego's experience and Elgiri's representatives, but it's also possible to do big animation projects when you do not come from that space, from that world. The production status for a project such as this one is a bit complex, and that was a challenge to to present and introduce during Cartoon Springboard and Cartoon Forum, but it was the special point of all of these things because our development process is so important. It's as important as the production itself. It has two stages, which are those workshops that I just talked to you about so that we could find the stories and register the voices, record the voices of our character, but also thanks to those real stories could we start our writing process. So it's a different way of working that requires a different financing and a different route to be followed. So that is why in these markets we look for allies, allies who are involved with us in this project from the beginning, because the most difficult part when you're financing in all genres is the development part of things. We currently have the support of the public station for children in the Flemish side of Belgium called Ketnet, with the federal cinema fund called VAF. These workshops that we are working on, we are organizing them together with UNHCR, with the UN, because we understood very early that this space needed to be a safe space. It needed to be a space where parents feel a certain connection and where if there are complicated topics to handle, because these are not just art, therapeutical art workshops, there needs to be a platform. So that's really important when you're dealing with population and people who are dealing with trauma. And we can talk about that later on. So, and the development has been carried out thanks to these local and international partners. These were writing workshops, development workshops that are available and that are very, very important to carry on with something that starts from one idea and ends up being serious. So the timeline for production is as follows. We started in 2021 until 2023 with development and pitching to get financing and co-production. 2024, we started the creative workshops and we registered the different testimonies for the 5 remaining episodes, and then financing and co-production, which is what we started doing with Cartoon Forum, and then the final development stage to start production in 2025 so that we can deliver at the end of 2026. Now, this is really important and we need to highlight it because it's not easy to do a pitching such as this, not just because of the topic, but also because of the development. This is a unique project with a unique vision. We want to empower children, those children who are in this situation, so that they may tell their stories. The most vulnerable part of migration is usually told in figures, and their stories are not usually in the cinema because it's very difficult to find that space to gather all of that information and to follow up on it. It takes time, it takes financing, and it requires a very special team to work on it. So we wanted to have conversations on immigration, and I think that this cannot be translated. This is an open-ended project. We are inviting our production allies. We're asking them to help us find the stories because when you do co-production treaties, depending on the country, there needs to be an involvement with regards to how you set up not only the artistic team, but also where the cultural legacy comes from. So this is still open. That is why I'm not talking about the country that receives them, but rather the country of origin. An open-minded project because a 6 times 12 project, so 6 episodes, 12 minutes, is something that doesn't work for public stations because it's usually 24, 52 minutes for television. But step by step, that has changed thanks to digital distribution and now public television in some countries. I'm guessing that in Spain that is changing as well, or at least that is what Televisión Española told me. It's changing with this new digital vision. So the traditional programming is what they call window shopping. So basically, that's the last part where you will premiere content for kids. I mean, kids are now consuming digitally, not traditional television. So we can maybe have a co-producer for just one episode, or we can have integrated episodes for special programming. To me, I think that in this space that has been repeated, but this project wants to generate a conscience and open a new dialogue with the public that we sometimes disregard because we don't understand certain situations, but they actually understand much more than we think. They show much more solidarity and empathy. They are the future, and I completely believe that this is a project for that age. But furthermore, I think that the most important thing is that my characters and this community with which I have been working and that I am a part of as a refugee needs to see that they are represented in the movies, and that is why I always have Dino with me when I talk about the project. Let me introduce Dino or Dino to you. We created a plushie. We did it for Daniel, so I will have to make another one for me. But we wanted to simply represent the project, and people take pictures with Dino, and I take pictures everywhere I go with Dino because it's really important, and they will see that later on. So the concept, it's the 360 concept. So your movie goes hand in hand with many different things. But to me, it's not just that. To me, it's having an object to really land the idea that these are people. They're not just figures, they're not numbers, they're children, and it's important to tell their story. Thank you very much. And now I'm going to tell you another side of things. Okay, here we go. So I'm not an illustrator. I did not study animation. But I do believe in the power of registry as a journalist and as a filmmaker who comes from the world of documentaries. And I understand that it has been actually difficult to own this, but I know how to tell stories with images. Much of my story has been dedicated to television and to the news. I worked for AFP, the French news agency, when I was in Latin America, and at a very complicated time in my country, I needed to take a break, and then I applied for a master's degree, an Erasmus Mundus master's, where you spend 3 years in 3 different countries to learn how to direct documentaries. And I thought I knew how to tell stories. I used to understand the television language, and to me, it was so enlightening to be able to talk to someone who knew nothing about cinema. I mean, that gave me the opportunity of being involved in projects that I would reject at the beginning because I didn't really like that link between reality and image, and I wanted to do something completely different. And nowadays, I understand that everything that we do has a sort of dialogue, and it's just informs us as creators and as artists, and everything has a purpose. I mean, what I like is to research, I like to understand and to explore the medium, the visual medium. That is why I call myself a visual narrator. And the projects that I have always been involved with always go back to this dialogue that I had at the time. I mean, as a Venezuelan woman, as a migrant, as a person who's different, and as a new narrator. So the last project, we did it last week in Leipzig. We premiered a virtual reality documentary. That was an amazing experience. 40% of it is made with animation, and the rest is 360. 360. It's a video. It's 360 video, and these are different projects. I think that just restricting ourselves to a genre is something that limits us, and animation allows us to fly. So big projects are usually small ideas that we have been worked on and have gotten support over time. This is something that a professor told me during my university studies. And when I say worked on, I mean personally worked on and have financial support on time, because this started in 2017 when I traveled to Peru because I wanted to do research. It was a completely different project, and That was the beginning of the migration crisis in Venezuela. That's when we had migrants that went to Colombia, but Peru was relatively new, and I went to Peru to work on cocoa, and I went to the jungle, but I spent 2 days in Lima, and I talked to my cousin's son who had done the same trip than Daniel, and that was Mariana, the journalist. And I thought, well, these stories, I just asked about the objects, thinking that I could do a documentary on objects. What does someone from Caracas, which is a tropical city that comes to live in Peru, in Lima, such an inhospitable trip? And I talked to adults, and I was talking about objects, and there was this kid running around, and he said, Sorry, but I want to tell you something." I said, "Yes, just a second, because I'm working." And I said, "No, no, 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 because you're asking everyone about the objects that they brought, and I wanted to tell you that I brought all the things that I shouldn't have brought." And I said, "What?" He said, "No, no, I brought all the things that I shouldn't have brought. My mom told me that we were going on holidays, and I brought all of my beach toys." And with that sentence, I understood that he did not say goodbye, that he was lied to, probably in the most important decision of his life. And probably his parents did the best they could at the time they did it. And that's when I realized, wow, so maybe that's the story I actually want to tell. With this perspective, a perspective that is not usually considered. So I went back to Belgium, and I started my refugee application process, asylum process, and I started studying children migration. There are free courses provided by UNICEF. There is a whole world of literature on migrants, and the big authors the world over are migrants, and they talk about identity and migration. And with that, I actually wrote an idea, and I used my journalistic lenses to create a short film where I wanted to have three kids who would travel, and you would understand where they were going to as it went along. So I did a pitch in Anima, which is a very important animation festival for children's content in Belgium. And I got an artistic residence in Zorobabel, which is a community co-production forum in Brussels. And I started talking to producers, and I felt that this project could actually be born. But then we were hit by COVID, and the project was only an audio project. I could not make it to Latin America. I could not travel there. At the same time, as it happens in life, you know what Diego was saying, you remain home. So I had applied before COVID to other development workshops with this idea. So when everyone talked about their projects, I said that mine could not take place because I couldn't travel to Latin America. But as you know, during COVID, well, everyone who are in the social margins were actually sinking. So when I did the fund for research, four of them had to return to Venezuela because their parents could not get jobs there. And I got a mentor who listened to me crying and my drama, my Latin American drama about everything that happened to me. And quite patiently, she only asked me one question. She said, "Do you really think that this project is urgent?" And I said, "Yes, of course. Listen, four of the stories, this and that." And she said, "Okay, then you have an audio because you researched. Why don't you go back to that audio and you start writing something?" And I took Daniel's story, and I did a documentary, an audio documentary, and that became episode 1 for our series. And I talked to Catarina Sobral, whom I'd met when I was in Lisbon, and she said, "Absolutely, I'll work with you." Then I got my Belgium producer during Cartoon Springboard, and in order to um, I'm sorry, before Cartoon Springboard. And in Cartoon Springboard, if they're not as special, it's not enough. And I saw that I heard stories that were very different than Daniel's story. Boys who had, and children who had migrated on their own to Colombia or with family members. And I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful to do a series where we can talk about different sorts of migrations in different parts of the world? And that's how I wrote the idea so that I could present that idea in Valencia in Cartoon Springboard. I got a producer, I got my public television that signed a co-production agreement with a filmmaker that had never directed a movie in Belgium. I do not come from the animation world and I had never done a series. So that's how we managed to do an animated teaser, and we went back to Cartoon Forum a couple weeks ago together with CineKid Script Lab that helped us, and there are different labs such as this one. So if you want information, I mean, these writing labs are very, very important to take them to a producer because that's what they will be asking for. And then we went to New Horizons, which is Kids Kino, which is the most important children festival that we have in Europe. It's in Warsaw. It's the one that has lasted the longest, and now we're having conversations with BBC Children. So we'll see what happens. And so we were talking about the references and what it is that we want to do.
Lección, como si tuviera.
This is like a lesson, as if this was the truth. But the more I go to those pictures, the more I read, the more I know the filmmaking processes. It's really important to know because it's very easy to get lost on the way. It's very easy to try to adapt things to see how we could get money, go to this or that panel, and know why that's going to be your anchor. And I think that this informs people and can give us some ideas. I went to kids narrative before I knew animation. I knew what was the point of view I wanted to take. This is very much developed in children's literature. These are incredible books that I suggest to you. I've read several novels. The most important, The Lightless Sky. He's no longer a teenager. He's an Afghan man who lives in London. And is one of the person that talks the most about the Afghan crisis and that has lived in the Taliban. And there's this film. I'm going to share with you the trailer. This is a new filmmaker, and this is before I Am Migrant came, and it's in my heart. And when this took shape, I've gone many times back to this.
A pesar de que esta película informó
Although this film gave me insight into how I wanted to do my film and how we wanted to treat it, this is a film for adults. It's an incredible picture. It's in Vimeo. I recommend you watch it. And that's why I thought, okay, this project needs to be animated if I want to integrate the children's perspective, I have to do through another medium. And Ina spoke about 1, 2, 3 of the 5 films. The Tower and Persepolis as her inspiration. The last one is a film that it won the IFA last year for young adults, and this is an incredible project. If you haven't watched Flee by Jonas Posha, or from the Nordics, it talks about the same topic. It uses animation not just as in a poetic way, and it talks about the figures. So I'll share with you, if you haven't watched it, the trailer. I got it at the EU Parliament. So it has a set of, well, it has this from European Parliament. It has some European Parliament tags.
Prøv en lille smule længere op. Meget, meget lidt. Så hvis du ligesom lukker øjnene nu,
Ja.
og prøver at trække vejret sådan dybt ind. Hvad betyder ordet hjem for dig?
Hjem er noget, som er trygt.
Kaboul, les attaques des Moudjahidines repris.
Har du nogensinde fortalt din livshistorie før?
Nej. Vi skal ud. Det er nu. Lidt dårligt som mediet, at min bror han bliver tilbage. Vi flygtede med menneskesmuglerne. Det værste mennesker i mit liv.
Har du fortalt Kasper nogle af de her historier overhovedet?
Nej. Det tager tid at stå det på folk. Det går rundt og tænke tilbage. Så det er min fortid, og det jeg kan ikke flygte fra det, og jeg har heller ikke lyst. Jeg kan mærke, at der skal ske noget. Her starter jo min historie.
Jonas took 11 years to make his film. It's the story of his childhood friend, and as the years went by, he recorded what he wanted to share about his story every time they met. And I'm not going to do spoilers, but really for me this film transformed the genre, and it's a great inspiration. He said that he wanted to give some tips or advice. No one has asked me, but except Manuel, but I thought I would. You have to look for training opportunities to develop your projects. I think that's the most important thing. We are in Europe, where you have many possibilities. In Spain, you have a great asset, which is the regionalization of the EU funds and carton springboards. I'm not making an advert here, but it's actually a time that changed and transformed my project. You need to identify the narrative tools and styles that attract you. For me, this was very important. And because I don't come from the animation world, I didn't have the language to know why I liked certain things. But now, with access to the internet and books, we can learn that. And it's good to know why why we like certain things, what they convey to us. And instead of reinventing the wheel, we can nurture our projects. Because also when you do pitching, people always have a reference. We are visual creators in a really visual world. And it's important to have those tools handy. Create a team with people whom you like. I think one of the most beautiful things about this new space that I'm creating in animation are the people. Because I think basically because this is the work of Buddhists, you need a lot of patience, but you also, it's impossible to do it on your own. So you need people, and they have to have a low ego. And once you have an idea, once you have achieved something, once you can present it somewhere, that means that this is quite a safe environment. And you need to find people, and we've seen it before in the three presentations. You need to have you need to like them, and you need to find a financial sustainability formula. I don't think anyone spoke about that, and I think I would like to say that. I don't know in Spain, but in Belgium you can't make a living off cinema. This is tough, but it's the truth. We need to find formulas to continue creating. You can work in a studio, in production, or be in a cafe. I've gone back to the world of news items in order to be able to pay the bills and continue creating in a space that allows me to go in and out. I know people who repair bikes whilst they make films. Incredible, because they need a space of disconnection. For me, the news are still a space which I believe is important to me, and I still believe in it sometimes. But they delegate, I do my bit, and that is it. I don't need to provide the creative space or the decisions, or especially in animation where everything's measured. And it's like a safe space for me that I can just go and execute, and I don't have to think in a creative manner when I go to the news. But you all have to find your formula. But I think it's good to see it as a need to have financial stability. And that is all. This is my email address. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to contact me. I have workshops I've done. I know people who have used other formulas. And if you're interested, without a doubt, you can write to me. It'll be a pleasure. Thank you.
Mi nivel técnico es extraordinario. Muchas gracias.
So thank you very much, Mariana. Thank you for your presentation. Because it happens to me all the time, don't worry. I think the truth is one of the things I like the most about your presentation is your honesty. Yes. And also seeing that there's things we'll agree on. That there's not a lot of ego and a lot of talent in animation, for instance. That is wonderful. And one thing that I believe is also very important is that when you have a project, many times you are selected in this or that event, and there's people who lose contact with reality. And I thought it was very interesting, the fact that you were able to keep your criteria, because if you say yes to everyone, you go insane, basically. Yes, thank you. It's difficult not to. Any questions? Hi, Mariana. I wanted to ask you about the financial support from UN. From the UN, is it very limited? Or, well, it's not financial support, it's development and logistical support. It started only to cross data, for data crossing, for me to do the archetypes. I needed data that is not published yet, and they publish with a regularity that makes sense for other things for them. But if you want to look for something specific about human geography, as they call it, you have to find the people actually who can give you that data. And they are very, very open, but you have to look for the information. And now they are an ally for the workshops. And by allies, I mean that They are organizing the workshops together with us. It's an additional activity in different countries for a population with whom they work in different manners, with mental health workshops or social integration or insertion workshops where these people now live. And for me, it's a logistic space which is really important, which is great that it doesn't turn into money, but it's money, really. It's money, it's time, and it's for me, an ethical connection as a filmmaker. Because, for instance, with Daniel, now I have a relationship with his family. He lives in Buenos Aires. Another chapter in his story. But with other cultures, it will not be like that. I will need interpreters and cultural interpreters. I need psychologists. And that space is provided to me by the UNHCR. It's the agency after UNICEF that better explores the co-production space. They have what they call Stateless, which is a series in Netflix. And there's small explorations into which they decided to allocate their money to see how they become they can collaborate in projects such as this, and they are great allies with a different visibility to cinema. But you have to be careful on how to work with it. Now they're research and development colleagues, or we could say partners, but we'll have to see what happens after. But we'll see. That'll be in the end. I don't want them to get involved in content, and I don't want them, and they don't want to either. Another question in terms of publishing this type of content, which is quite tough. Have you found any problems when telling some of the stories that the children are telling you, or even the relatives? Yes, in fact, this is one of the reasons why this project is with animation, in order to protect the testimony. This is Daniel. Daniel is now going to be 11 next month. I know his mom. She gave me the authorization to tell his story. But I don't know what's going to happen with Daniel when he's 25. So we only use first names. We use very vague data. And there's the total protection of their identity. And this is a collaboration. That's why the co-creation spaces are very important. There is, I mean, this is not a project about, but with. And this is very important to me as a filmmaker. I make human stories, or human interest, as they call it. I believe in the power of speaking about a topic through someone's story, because of how private and intimate that can be. But I don't do it about a character. It's with the character. It's a very open dialogue. And for me, it's the power space that I have behind a pen or behind a camera. So everything's very open. Everything's been discussed with the parents. I haven't had any problems yet. There are things I'm working on with the stories, which are unaccompanied minors. And when you try to get their stories, it's more difficult, because unaccompanied minors are the responsibility of the country of destination. So until they establish a foster parents dynamic, you have to look at things differently, and you have to get to them in a different way. However, it's clear what's happening, right? I mean, there's nothing concealed or hidden here. Gracias. Thank you. Hi, Mariana. My question is very straightforward. Given the project hasn't finished and there's still a few years ahead of you, have you thought in creating one more story with everything that is happening in Gaza? Or you're ruling that out for another chapter in the future? Who knows? That's the million-dollar question. I understand that 6 episodes is not enough to portray the world and the times. I mean, I knew at the time when I started, the war in the Ukraine was not there. It's not because of that I added a sixth. It's just that when we decided to do a series, it was about data. On those 6 countries, 94. These 6 countries account for 94% of the total migrating population in the world. So that was my journalistic perspective. I could say how we could cover that area. But when we go to pitching, this is $1 million question. This could be a series. We could extend it. Well, there are many formulas we could use, but I think those decisions will be for the future. This is for children's. If there'll be a second season, well, I don't know. Or right now, I consider it. I don't know if there'll be a saga. Who knows? We'll see what happens with the first season, and we'll see if we're also able to obtain the stories. That's even more complex. Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Mariana. A big round of applause for her, please.
Vamos a hacer una pequeña pausa de...
We're going to have a 10-minute break, and at 5:30 we come back for Álvaro Ramírez talk, which will be very interesting. He'll talk about his animation career in Spain and outside. Okay, thank you very much.